writing and lift up other writers. So first I want to talk a little bit about you as a writer, then we'll segue in specifically to the most recent novel, which I loved, Good Family Fitzgerald, and then we'll also be talking about the Simpson Literary Project. Joe, this novel came out simultaneous with the beginning of lockdown, so that meant your whole book tour needed to quickly pivot to being a virtual book tour. So just give us a sense. I know you've been really busy actually with the virtual book tours. How's that going, and what do you notice? What do you like about it? What's not so great about it?
You know, I think this is going to sound glib. Well, it's glib the way I'm going to say it, but there's the, so Eric, what's happening here? I'm trying to figure out where I am here.
You're on the screen. Why don't you put it on speaker view?
All right, speaker view. Okay, so then I see everybody. All right. I think isolation is the natural set point for a writer, and for me, I'm not. It's sort of an exaggerated version of what it means to be in isolation. Now that's very glib because here we are watching the wheels come off of the world, and I think that is it's a reminder for every writer about the stakes that are at play when you're writing, and why you shouldn't take yourself so seriously. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a way in which during this pandemic and all the converging pandemics, the viral, the social, the political, all these converging and pandemics are concentrating our attention on things. I mean, I was going to sound kind of over romantic, but I can look at a flower in a different way now. It seems more intensely available. And I have lots of roses here, and I can do that. But then the next step is, well, now that you've got your attention fixed, I mean, what's your intention now? What are you going to do with this information? We know that pandemics upend the world. We know that happens, and it's a very even though it's not been studied much, the effect of pandemics. We know that after world wars and so forth, that things never change. Things change completely. Like in the Middle Ages with the bubonic plague, it ushered in the Renaissance after that. Now, it wasn't causal, but it was correlated. And it reminds me of the great book by Giovanni Boccaccio. He wrote in the 14th century. He was living in Florence, and he, with the plague all around and people die, bodies in the streets, and he takes, the story features 10 millennials who go out to the countryside and tell each other stories about lust and chivalry and heroism. And it's a great, great book. And it begins with the first line of the Decameron is, the human thing is to have compassion for those who are afflicted. Is to have compassion for those afflicted. And how does he proceed to show compassion? He tells stories, 100 stories. So that connects to, for me, what matters to me in the Simpson Project, which is about storytelling as the foundation of a literate democratic society. The stakes are that high. Now it's interesting that when, how do we do it? There was this wonderful essay that Uttara Chowdhury, who's a Simpson Fellow at Girls Inc., we're going to publish in Simpsonistas 3. And she writes about the experience with these girls. It's a brilliant essay. She quotes one of the kids at Girls Inc. saying, and they're doing it all virtually, right? And they just sort of made this up on the fly. And she's teaching 30 kids, 30 girls in downtown Oakland. And the girl says, she's quoted as saying, something to the effect, I used to feel alone, now I don't. And Uttara has this brilliant reflection on what does it mean to be socially distant and how does that relate to writing? I mean, there's a way in which writing is the essence of social distancing. There's a way in which it's the obliteration of social distancing. Did I say too much or too little?
Well, you actually got into what my next question was going to be, and I was reflecting just Sunday, the New York Times Magazine organizing principle was all about, from the Decameron, and they had asked, I'm not sure if they asked 100 writers around the world to write stories for this at this moment in time. And my husband wants to know if you knew something about the oncoming coronavirus, because in Simpsonistas 2, which we published last fall, went out to press last summer, you wrote all about the Decameron in this book in your introductory remarks. So it's kind of interesting. And now everybody's talking about Boccaccio and the Decameron. So
Well,
I find that fascinating.
I did go to graduate school at Cal,
Yeah.
so I have Nostradamus-like qualities. That's true.
Diane
Yes.
is still talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, now the Decameron is everywhere, but I think what's good about it was great. It's a wonderful metaphor, but pandemic. I mean, right there, what's an interesting thing going on here? What are our metaphors for what's going on in the world? Maybe Susan Sontag writes brilliantly about illness as metaphor. I don't know if metaphors. I don't know if we're in the age of metaphors right now. There's some, but that's a stupid statement. I know that's stupid. I don't think we've arrived at the right metaphor yet. I know we haven't even established the facts enough, except the facts of the mortality and the deaths and the light and our political life. Those are facts that we can focus on. But yeah, it's great. Yeah. I guess I saw something so serious about our project that I raised the stakes by saying, well, storytelling is important even in a pandemic.
So I have like a two-part question. As I think we've established, but maybe not. These 15 books you've written: fiction, memoir, poetry, and nonfiction. And so I'm interested to have you talk about your process and like how you get inspired to write about particular things. And then a secondary question is, do you ever feel like your audience wants to hear something, so you should write about that, but you're really interested to write about something else? Like right now, with all the serious world problems, do you feel compelled to address those, or are you marching to your own drummer and you're not bringing that into your writing life?
Well, you ask about my audience. Well, as everybody knows, I'm very famous for being unknown. So I have just this little tiny audience of avid readers who can't wait for my next book to appear. And I will satisfy those people eventually. I think I began I'm always rooted in being a poet. And it all comes down, poetry is, well, there are many different types of poems and poets. There are explainers, and then there are people who make music. And I'm sort of on the music. I'm on the music side. I don't know if I can explain anything. And I don't know if I have access to, I don't have rational access to whatever makes me write something. I wasted a lot of years involved in lots of activities that distracted me from writing. And when I finally published my first novel when I was 50, 2 years ago. No, that wasn't 2 years ago. When I published my first novel, I knew that there was a lot of stuff that I wanted to write about. And I hope to do it. So I don't know if I'm getting at your question, but except to say that I don't want to, I think it's important for me never to stop experimenting. I think it's all a radical experiment. Like, I've been accused, well, all your novels are about the mob or the church, God or the capo. And I think that was pretty true until I wrote Sibel and Sabella, which is written from the point of view of a millennial female junior editor at a little publishing house who's very tall and was captain of her basketball team, has the foulest mouth in the world from the East Side, New York City. But until that point, that would have been a true statement. And so in Good Family Fitzgerald, I sort of combine all these worlds, the mob and the church, the patriarchies converge, the patriarchies collapse upon each other, and the cultures collapse upon each other, Irish American, Italian American, African American, it's all in there. As somebody said, I don't know if he meant this as praise. He says, you wrote about everything you know. And I said, oh, God, that's a.
Oh yeah, not sure.
Well, I do think that this is the most fun there's a real estate negotiation that is a pretty important part of this novel. And it's much more fun than any real estate negotiation I ever actually went through. So I'll say that. And here, you know, in this novel, you know, we have marriages, we have a baby being born, we have a school falling apart, we have a school being created, we have people being killed, we have people falling in love, we have people in therapy, we have, you know, Catholics running amok, we have teenagers running amok, we have sinners, we have a selfie that goes really bad. Somebody takes the wrong selfie, it goes really bad. And then, you know, to top it all off, a writer is born into this family. Very bad news. Very bad news to have a writer being born into your family. All your secrets are about to be exposed. You're all about to be sold out with a writer in the family.
Well, so I would jump in there. So I think you kind of covered what I was going to say, because I feel like, yes, with Sabella was definitely off. It was not autobiographical in the way your former, you're changing hats, that's fun. In the way your former novels were. And then The Good Family Fitzgerald brings in two of your favorite themes, which are definitely the mob and the Catholic Church. And yet I didn't feel like, I forgot you were writing it when I was reading it. I love this novel. I was so invested in the characters, I didn't want it to be over. So that's the
nicest thing you ever said to me. That's the very nicest thing you ever said. Thank you.
It could be true. I know. I think you might be right. That is one of the nicer things I've said to you, but it's true. I wanted to quote actually one of our own here, Berkeley side book reviewers, Michael Berry, recently wrote, because I felt like he described it one sentence really well. Joe DePrisco's new novel, The Good Family Fitzgerald, is a sprawling saga of an Irish-American clan, a richly comedic drama with indelible characters told with biting wit. That's just a little headline, but it was really, really fun. So,
you want me to read a piece?
I'm sorry it's over.
You want me to read a piece real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Well, here's this is early on in the first chapter. It's a hard book for me to excerpt passages because there are so many spoilers. There's a lot of plot.
Yeah, exactly.
But one thing that's going on is, off the top, Francesca marries Anthony Fitzgerald. It's a mixed marriage, Irish-American, Italian-American. I mean, the Italians have the code of omerta, you know, silence. The Irish have the opposite code, whatever that is. So here we are in this first chapter. I'll do just a little couple of pieces here. It won't take long. A reflection on the Irish and the Italians. Irish and the Italians. The Irish may have invented talking, but the Italians invented never shutting up. The Italians may have originated fashion and style and design. The French may take a number, while the Irish originated not giving a knee wobbler what anybody thought about how they looked. They were both cops and mobsters, sometimes simultaneously. They were equally connoisseurs of contemptuousness. Italians looked down upon somebody not born in their hometown, and the Irish, anybody who wasn't born Irish, and as far as the Fitzgeralds were concerned, sipped anything other than Jameson. And yet they both fancied themselves experts in matters of the heart, too. Natural-born poets and artists and die-hard loyalists to the bitter end when it came to their friends. Most were what you might call Catholic. The Catholics couldn't confidently articulate what Catholic meant anymore. All their emotions were operatic in scale, and their glasses were not empty indefinitely. They deplored their countries, but with patriotic conviction. They were generous with their money, and even more generous with yours. They trusted you around their spouses and with other precious possessions, but kept a close watch, because all men are dogs, and you never know. They were both dedicated to the idea of the family for which they would die if they didn't demolish it first. They both served up tragedy all day long, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and comedy for dessert. But speaking of cuisine, that's when equivalence evaporates, as only the Italians can be said to have one. And they both lived and died for and with soccer, which they called football or calcio, and wholeheartedly believed in the vagaries of luck, as when the two converged in the latest penalty kick of misfortune. Stereotypes like these may come in handy insofar as each contains a germ of truth. Thus, only a fool subscribes. Italians and the Irish. They were exactly the same, only completely different. Francesca recognized that some married couples maintained they benefited from learning how to fight fair, because to their way of thinking, clashing was inevitable once the honeymoon glow dimmed. If you believe the rom-com movies and TV shows, fighting amounted to an aggressive, ritualized form of foreplay or anthropological display. Ultimately, married people fought not so much to defend themselves or to draw blood, that is, but in order to be intimate. That could make a kind of sense, she supposed, though that made it sound tactical. And the notion of erotic strategizing, a frat boy's wet dream, depressed her. She'd concede this much. Post-battle sex could sweep the decks clear, exchanging one sort of emotional intensity for a more satisfying kind. At least when each member of the couple suspends self-interest and stops to care for the other more than achieving the goal of scoring points. Then interests overlap as bodies and souls merge in mutual consent. Arguments melt into meaninglessness in the heat of passion. But sex was not the result and not the byproduct of a negotiation, at least not the kind of sex anybody really craved. It was more like reciprocal submission, which sounded both logically impossible and absolutely real. As a rule, as far as she was concerned, being a devotee of marital combat meant not being good at being married. On the street, in the boardroom, in the financial markets, in court, every fight must have a winner and therefore must have a loser. But for her in a marriage, fighting risks leaving two losers on the sweaty mat, or at least two unwinners. Of course, she was just guessing, a rank amateur. When it comes to intimacy and marriage, everybody was an amateur, hazarding wild hunches. All her friends, this was a stat drawn from an idiosyncratic small sampling, while many of her female friends had maneuvered their mates into going on a couples counseling peacekeeping mission, a type of mediation. In practice, somebody was often wishing to commission a psychic makeover on her partner, or somebody was lodging a kind of criminal complaint, in which case couples counseling functioned as a branch of law enforcement. Couples counseling never crossed Anthony and Francesca's minds, not once. They knew they were lucky, but they didn't know how lucky until one day they were not.
So that sets it up nicely. That's in chapter 1, correct?
Yes, when that begins, all happy families are, no, that's not, that's Costa. I didn't write that.
So for those of you who haven't had a chance to enjoy the novel, it's populated with these, or led by 5 or 6 really strong female characters, which is not to say that the men are not impotent. It's just the women, they're all very different from one another and very strong. So that probably added to my delight.
Well, thanks for reading it. Thanks for reading it. So here we are talking, let's talk about the Simpson Project a little bit, shall we?
Sure.
Or no, did you have something else? I thought you were pausing there. Did I read?
No, I want to ask you one question about, well, 2 questions actually about your writing, and then why don't we transition to the project after that. So 1, do you feel a moral obligation to your characters when you're writing?
Well, that's an interesting way to put it. I would say that that's kind of, I mean, to be, one of the weird things about writing, a memoir, for instance, is, I mean, I had this experience more than once, writing about people I didn't get along with, didn't like, people we had combat with, and people who didn't like me and I didn't like them, but they were important to my story, so I had to write about them. And I found that, well, one of the interesting challenges was that, to me personally, was, wait a second, I can actually begin to see their point of view. I can begin to be a little more sympathetic to them. Now, no one's ever called me a Zen master. Okay? I'm never going to do that, although I aspire to be something. But the point is, I think when you're writing, your imagination, I mean, John Gardner put it this way, when you are, step back, writers can be terrible people. I know terrible people who are writers, and I know writers who are terrible people. I know great people who are writers, wonderful people. So John Gardner said, well, when you're writing, maybe you're your best self. You're your most generous self. I don't want to suggest, when people say morals, I get to have a lesson, we're going to teach some moral and give some moral instruction. I don't have any of that. But I think the moral imagination is to be fair to your characters and to be fair to your readers. Now, but on the other hand, if you're writing only for readers, you're probably failing. You're trying to please somebody else. You got to please yourself. You got to please the characters. You got to stay true to the mission of the book, the mission of the characters. And I think that's true in any genre, short stories, poetry, whatever. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think a related question, which was the other question I wanted to introduce at this point, is that I was participating in an interview between a former Pulitzer Prize winner and our current 2020 Simpson Joyce Carol Oates Prize winner. So that's Daniel Mason. And the question on the table to Daniel from this Pulitzer Prize winner was around the concept that he was saying to Daniel, surprisingly, our audience thinks we're really interested in the characters, but I'm more interested in the words. What about you, Daniel? And that was shocking to me because I was just sort of, I don't know, upended by that, because I was just imagining that writers are more, I mean, of course it's a craft and you're interested in the words, but then I found it kind of unsettling that he was showing a lack of interest in his characters.
Oh, I just think he's being cute. That's Andrew Sean Greer being cute, I think.
Yeah, I didn't want to, I wasn't going to reveal him, but
yeah,
yes,
and
it was.
Now, when Daniel and I interviewed, we got into some very related areas. There's a wonderful, I think it's a pretty damn good interview that we have posted on our website. We got into that. Well, and he said, well, I asked him, I said, what question have you never been asked that you always wanted to be asked? And he said, my best questions are when people ask about a word or a sentence. He said, well, about a sentence. And because that gets into craft, and craft sounds remote to art, but no, you can't have art without craft, and maybe vice versa. So I get the point that you make a story with words. And so I get the glib point that he's making. But yeah, let's put it this way. A good day for a writer is when you write a good sentence, or two, if you're really lucky, 3 or 4. That's fantastic. And there.
Okay.
Go.
Thank you. So we're going to transition over to the Simpson Literary Project. So our project is about writers supporting writers. And the mantra is storytelling is the foundation of a literate democratic society. So what I want to open up now is tell us about how you co-founded this organization. What inspired you to do this?
How was I the founding chair of this organization? Well, I don't know. I don't know how I get to be the chairs of anything, but historically, this began 6 years ago, I guess, when we began having conversations. I was very involved with the English department at Cal. Genaro Padilla was the chair of the English department at that point. And we started talking, and Don McQuaid, former vice chancellor, we were involved, starting having conversations about what about outreach? How can we get Cal more involved, the English department more involved? Simultaneously, I was having conversations with my newly adopted world out here at Lafayette, the Foundation, the Learning Center. And they were very interested in outreach as well. So I can't explain linearly how we got to the place where after hundreds of meetings and lunches, remember restaurants? I can barely remember them, but we did a lot of those and they were wonderful meetings. Anyway, so we knew that there was that we wanted to celebrate. We knew we needed to reach out to the community. The English department, the library needed to reach out to the community more. And I always had the feeling that there were so many emerging writers prizes that they were great, fine, it's good to be. I won some myself. It's a great thing. It's a nice thing when you're a kid to get that kind of thing. But what about emerged writers? Hey, wait a second. I was talking to Diane Johnson when we were founding this project. It was a woman been around for a long time, written a lot of best-selling novels, and brilliant woman, brilliant writer. And I was talking, well, it's going to be a mid-career author. It's going to be for somebody who's in the middle of a career, And Diane said, well, I'm in the middle of my career. I said, okay, great. I'm going to blow up that concept right now. So what is it to be emerged is to be continually emerging. I mean, that's where we are. So we wanted to have a prize for a serious prize. We knew we had access to some money to give a serious prize, in this case, $50,000, to an emerged and still emerging author of fiction, which we define as having published a few novels or short story books of consequence. But then that wasn't enough. We knew it had to be about outreach. We knew we had to, so we got involved with wonderful organizations teaching kids, like Girls Inc. I alluded to a second ago, Girls Inc. Alameda County, and Northgate High School, which is a comprehensive high school in Walnut Creek, and then Juvenile Hall in Martinez. And so we've conducted multiple workshops led by English department graduate students who are creative writers. For instance, this year, Noah Warren is a Simpson Fellow. He just won the Yale Younger Poets Prize. All right, give me a break. It's a big deal. And he's a wonderful teacher. The kids like him, and he has wonderful results. So we had that. And then Joyce Carol Oates came on board. She was teaching at Cal. She was here from Princeton every spring for a while. We got to know each other. And she became the writer-in-residence, the Simpson Project writer-in-residence at the Lafayette Library. She's a solid citizen. She and I taught a memoir writing workshop together to older writers across the generations we're committed to. And so over time, we changed the name of the prize itself to the Joyce Carol Oates Prize, with permission of the key people, some of whom we all know and love. So we wanted to get, we think it was the right thing. I mean, she is such an unruly genius, as someone just wrote about her this week. She is the unruly genius, but she's a wonderful friend to the project, believes in what we're doing, solid contributor to Simpsonistas, which is our other thing. We produce this anthology every year. I remember I got a call, and who's in this anthology? Anybody who's connected to the Simpson Project. Could be a board member, it could be an English professor, it could be a graduate student, and it could be the kids from the workshops. I remember when the first anthology came out, I got a call from Julaine Virgil, who's the CEO of Girls Inc. She said, oh, Joe, I can't believe it. My girls are in the same book with Joyce Carol Oates. I said, yeah, that's the idea. That's the whole idea, what we're talking about. Anyway, so it's a multivarious kind of organization, and you've been leading us, Diane, as our first executive director, our first employee, actually, providing some infrastructure and heightened illumination as to what you're doing. And
that's what I'm doing? Okay.
Yeah, even right now, even as we speak, you're doing it. So, I mean, what's been for you? I mean, how'd you get involved in this organization? As if I didn't know. And
I know.
And,
well,
and what's important to it for to you for it?
Yeah, so I'm an avid reader, as you know, fiction and non, and I feel like for me, reading is so important. It really continually informs me and helps me, be a person in the world. And what can I work on, and what can I do, and how do I contribute? And I draw from both fiction and non. So that's just like a baseline. And I would say what really inspires me is the concept and what we're doing around the workshops. And the reason I think those are so important, offering these creative writing workshops to currently high schoolers, but then we're looking at a new partner with, in particular, California College of the Arts, and that will be working with middle school students
In San Francisco, yeah.
in San Francisco.
And these workshops are free of charge too.
Yeah, Boys and Girls, that particular venue will be the Boys and Girls Clubs of San Francisco. And what I love is that we're helping young people like develop a point of view and have a confidence that they should have a point of view, and then be able to actually express themselves in writing. So to be clear, we're not like intent on training young people to be writers per se by profession, but giving them the skills to be able to have a point of view and express themselves. And that's a life skill. So that really inspires me. And one of the main projects that I imagine myself continuing to work on as I'm the executive director is finding new academic partners, finding new venues for our workshops. That is key. We're planning to do that in the Bay Area. We're planning to expand, once we're out of a lockdown situation, across the country. So I guess that would be it in a nutshell in terms of inspiration.
Well, and I would say in response to what you said about we're not training, we're not running a creative writing program.
Exactly.
Yes, that's true, but I'm positive there's one writer we came across last year, an 11th grader.
Oh yeah.
Who's going to be a very big deal as a poet. There's just no question in my mind. And when she read at our event last October, and I had to talk her into reading. She was, I really don't know if I can read this. I really don't. She gets up there, blows the doors off the place.
I know.
It was a fantastic poem. It's just not even a good poem, fantastic poem. And afterwards, Mom comes up to me and says, her life will never be the same. It'll never be the same. So we are doing, now, the interesting thing to me and what you were saying is, well, I'm going to ask you, what do you think is the correlation or the connection between the prize and the workshops and Simpsonistas and Joyce Carol Oates? What's the through line for you? What's the connector for you? Is it the mantra, storytelling is the foundation of a literate society?
I don't know if you're going to finish the question. Okay, so what's the through line? Well, I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying originally about what inspired me. I think writing is really important. I feel like people should read. So we can do our part by supporting emerging writers. And then there are many, and then also, how do we continue to fill the pipeline and create a literate society overall? We help nurture the young people so that they, I don't know, I'm just repeating myself.
But then at the same time,
some of them will become writers.
Right. But then,
others will appreciate writing.
Right. But our prize winners, T. Geronimo Johnson, Anthony Mara, Leila Lalami, Daniel Mason. These are magnificently talented writers who are going to be read for a long time to come. And they're all solid citizens. They all have a social conscience. That's the wrong way to put it these days. They're involved in the world. And
I want to talk about something. I know I'm seeing like what we should talk about. So what's different about our prize? It's not just here's a nice prize with a significant amount of money. That the good thing it does do, it also affords the writer an opportunity potentially to maybe step back and carve away from some of their other professional commitments so they can spend even more time writing. And the other element of our prize is that we ask and we sort on people that want to be engaged with the community and with other young writers. Right. So that's one of the things that's different about our prize versus many of the other prizes. So we have a residency. Yes, our writers.
The residency at Cal was very important. Right.
Yes. Yeah. And unfortunately, this year we had to postpone, I don't know, indefinitely our residency that we had scheduled to be at Cal, which was, second week in March. So we're creatively trying to come up with how do we serve our stakeholders with our prize winners in a more virtual way.
Right, and you did such a wonderful job organizing that residency with Steve Justice and Scott Saul and everybody in the English department there. And it was a pity that we lost them. We had wonderful events planned. Yeah. So, the pandemic.
Yeah, 11 events planned, yeah.
Well, and Joyce was flying out here. I mean, this is going to sound crazy looking back, but, you know, back on March 4th, well, are you still,
I know.
I don't know if I should fly out there. I said, well, I don't know either. What do you
I
think?
know.
And it's like insanity. We didn't know what was going on. We
Definitely.
canceled at the last minute. It was just heartbreaking. It was just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And it really took the wind out of our fundraising sales, that's for sure. But that's okay.
That's for sure.
We're gonna.
Yeah, so speaking of that, so we're embarking on our first Zoom fundraiser, as are many other nonprofits. We'll be doing that this fall. So we're getting excited about that. We're going to be profiling, or we'll have joining us our prize winners and a number of our student writers will be reading and participating. We'll have a few surprises for our guests. Yeah, but we're going to take that plunge to do a Zoom fundraiser.
That's right. God help us.
I know. I know. This pandemic is so. I mean, that you're speaking to one of the big challenges we have. I would say like 92% of our programming up until the pandemic was in person. All sorts of events. The workshops are all taught by the Simpson Fellows in person with the students.
Great parties.
Great parties. And now we've had to reimagine, what are we doing? How can we add value virtually and remotely? And so, yeah, I think a couple of things we're doing. One thing I would say is silver lining. We're planning to gather small, intimate groups of stakeholders in these, I mean, Joe, you know this, I'm saying this to the other folks, in these, what we're calling Zoom coffee clutches. And we're going to start them August, September, and get together 3 and 4 people at a time with a board member, Joe and myself, to talk about what we're doing, what we're excited about, and get feedback and ideas from our stakeholders, friends of the project. And we would never have thought to do something like that had it not been a pandemic. We wouldn't have done it in person. We wouldn't have held 20 little, gone around and had 20 coffee meetings with 4 people. So
Right.
I think this is like an opportunity to think creatively. How do we engage with people? How do we kind of get some really good ideas from others? So that's a silver lining.
Well, yeah, and like this very conversation here, where I get to talk about my 2 favorite subjects, the Simpson Project and
Yourself.
myself. So anyway, Diane, is there something else? Well, we want everybody, we'd love for you to get involved with the Simpson Project. We have a wonderful website. It's always evolving under Diane's leadership. We got lots of content, essays, everything's on there. There's wonderful stuff on our website. Love for you to take a look at that sometime. And what else, Diane? Do we have questions, Eric?
Yes, we do. We have 2. Stephen had asked, do we know that the Renaissance and the plague had no casual connection?
Well, that would be a question for a historian. And
Casual or causal?
yeah, that's a profound question. I did read this very interesting piece in the New Yorker yesterday about this very subject. And I would refer Stephen to that because I don't, but yeah, I mean, everybody was making the connection. Oh, Shakespeare wrote King Lear under the conditions of the pandemic. Yeah, I guess that's true. I don't know if it's causal. I think suffering is, okay. John Cage was asked one time, somebody was, they were having an argument. He and a friend were having an argument about something. And his friend said, don't you think there's too much suffering in the world? And John Cage said, no, just the right amount. Like, okay. I mean, suffering, pandemic, I don't know. It's overwhelming. I don't know what your take on that, Diane, is. Do you have a take on that question?
Oh gosh, that's a big question. I think I'm going to ask a micro question though. So many folks in the time of this shelter at home are finding themselves taking up new hobbies. They're doing sourdough bread making, or they are, knitting while doing Netflix, chickens. So Joe, listening to new podcasts, what are your go-tos? Well, 2 things. What are you drawing from in terms of soothing activities? maybe, and then also, do you have any new hobbies that you've taken on?
You're a clown. Okay, I'll go with that question.
I know.
I mean, years ago, I remember I was in my office writing one day, and Patty comes in and says, you got to get out more. You got to get in the world. And she said, you should go like join a board or something. Boy, was that a big move. So, 5 or 6 boards later and several chairmanships of boards later, I don't know if I call that a hobby. As an old friend of mine asked, so you're the chair of the board. What's that like? And I said, I learned something every day. And he said, that bad, huh? I think, okay. So yeah,
That's a good one.
So I don't know if I have any. I don't know if I've never had a hobby, I guess.
Wow, I wasn't trying to out you in front of the folks. I didn't realize that was the answer.
I'm a haberdasher. I wish I could knit.
I know. I wish I could knit. That'd be really nice.
Everything I like, I worked at. I played cards for a living around the world. I ran restaurants. I was a general manager of restaurants. I don't know. I lived in a monastery. I guess all my hobbies were my life, I guess. And writing, I don't know.
Well, you're still writing, so as you said.
Sanctimonious to say it's as a vocation. But so I think that there's a real deep connection for me between what's going on in the project. I mean, a lot of writers think it's a zero-sum game. If I don't get a prize and you get a prize, well, I'm mad. I didn't get that prize. I hate those people. Okay, let me take that back. Another word. It's like a really stupid thing to say, It's like, come on. There's enough for everybody. The pie is big enough for everybody. Readers are there for everybody. Earn your readership.
Oh, I see we have 2 questions from Lisa.
Okay,
Yeah,
Lisa.
and I see a few from Lisa. Lisa, do you want to ask your questions directly?
Lisa, do you want to unmute?
I guess not.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Here she is.
Hi.
Hey, Lisa.
Hi. I don't have my camera on because I was out for a walk and I'm not socially acceptable.
Oh, that's ridiculous. She's always cute.
So I'll go with my last question first. So do you think storytelling in Boccaccio's era, which was way before social media, was more important than in our era when we have the bombardment of too much storytelling, which is often bad, of TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and all these other modes of getting stories, but a lot of them are bad, and a lot of them are what's eating up the brains of our young people, especially who aren't used to reading good fiction.
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah. Chew on that.
Mm.
Well, what do you think, Diane?
Oh, Joe, you're the writer. I'm going to let you take the first pass.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, the anti-social media scourge is serious, I suppose. I'm not, I think stories can be, people have always been, Homer was complaining about, people did better stories back in the old days, before the Odyssey and the Iliad. I think it's easy to romanticize the past, but it's a more compelling question, Lisa, when you think about, Boccaccio. He didn't have Netflix. By the way, parenthetically, I'm not so sure Netflix is everything we want it to be, but unless they sponsor us, in which case they are fantastic. But it's, I think that there's, people are hungry for stories. I think this is why the small screen, what they call small screen TV, is so compelling. People need their lives filled up with stories. And yeah, I think it is different today. Is it better? Is it worse? I guess I'm all over the place, Lisa, on that. I think you have a strong opinion about it, though, which is that this is not a good development where we are. On the other hand, would we trade places with the 14th century? I don't think so.
Well, and also I wonder is it better because we have more people creating more content, be it TikTok and Instagram and stuff? Maybe that's good because they're telling their stories. I just happen to think a lot of it doesn't have much quality. It's not actually helping our foundation of a literate democratic society.
Well, that's fascinating. Let respond to that this way. I'm the judge, chair of the jury of the Joyce Carol Oates Prize. Every year I get to read many, 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 many novels and books of short stories. And I'm impressed by a lot. There are a lot of tremendously talented writers who could have been on our short list and maybe even could have won the prize. Sure, I mean, publishing is a crapshoot, and there's no correlation between advances and quality for publishers. But I'm continually impressed by the, yeah, I mean, and it raises tangentially, maybe not so tangentially, maybe centrally. You know, we have to seriously address the systemic racism in our literate culture, our publishing culture. And here we are, this little tiny institution called the Simpson Literary Project, and we have to face that. We have to think that through. I mean, is our board representative of the kind of audience, community we want to serve? Are our winners representative? Now, if I said to you, yeah, we have one Black winner and one woman of color won the prize, you know, so what? That doesn't mean anything. That's just, those are accidents of a small scale. But I think the deepest question is, I mean, how are we responding to the needs to represent voices across the spectrum? What do you got, Eric?
Oh, and then Lisa also wanted to know where we can get copies of the anthology Simpsonistas.
Diane's got it right. No, it's honestly, Lisa, it's available everywhere books are sold.
If they go to the website, can they find it there?
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Yes. Lisa also asked a second question. Are the writers who were selected only from the Greater Bay Area? No. If you look at on our website, on the prize page, you'll see we have, so far we've had 20 finalists, 4 prize winners. No, how many finalists? 5.
It's a little more than, it's like 22
anyway.
or something. Yeah.
And they're all over the country. With the finalists are really
national.
everywhere. It's not an important consideration. In fact, it's such an unimportant consideration that we gave the prize to Daniel Mason, who teaches at Stanford, which was, you know, come on, that's a big jump right there that we would even entertain the idea. So we got past that. But good question though, and people do think we're not a regional prize. We're all over the place.
Yeah, in fact, I don't know, it's probably going way out of turn here just to kind of let folks know. I mean, this year in the strategic plan, we were actually making serious progress on connections and affiliations and partnerships with literary organizations and academic institutions in both Los Angeles and Brooklyn. And we've kind of had to, you know, just slow play that a bit, given that we're in a shelter at home, but those conversations and connections are still moving forward.
Anything else, Eric?
No, that was all the questions, unless anybody else had a question that just got sparked. Well, if not,
It's a pleasure.
Diane, did you want me to read? You wanted to read something else?
Oh,
right?
yeah. Joe, can you just read one of your poems?
That'd be great. Thank you.
Really
You know,
good.
that usually brings a dinner party to a dead end. Oh, the poet will now be reading a poem. I gotta go.
So a great way to end the presentation, right?
Okay, the poet will now throw hot water on the fire. Anyway, this is the last poem in my most recent book. It's called My Mission Statement, which is actually kind of related to what we've been talking about. So my mission statement, at the time I wrote this poem, every board I was on was writing a mission statement. Every single board, which you need to do. It's a great exercise, it's important. So my mission statement, and it has as an epigraph, my mission statement, to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. That was Nike's mission statement, to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. Now my poem. My mission is to be a unique driving experience. My mission is to be putty in your hands. My mission is to be your favorite pair of jeans. My mission is to whisper in your ear in several pre-selected Romance languages. to star in a movie that takes Sundance by storm. I hope Penelope Cruz will be in it, even though she will contractually throw pans of ink on my head and shoot me colorfully with a sleepy pistol and make her lips do that pouty thing upon which we can hang the collected works of Henry James. Which reminds me, my mission is to rewrite the dull parts of the Kama Sutra. Because listen, people, what's a man without a dream? I say he's calamari soup. I say he's a man without a mission statement. That is why my mission is to be a global partner and a preferred provider, to serve nutritious food to a hungry world, to leave it all on the field, to go hard when coach calls my number. My mission is to write one thing you must slip under your pillow. My mission is be the pillow. My mission is be the night. My mission is to bring inspiration and innovation to each recluse in town, to every space station captain, to all radio listeners too shy to call in, to even the stranger who left a nice note on my windshield that time. You know who you are. My mission is be in business forever.
Whew.
Well, Diane, it's been fun working with you. It's been great. We are kicking it down. We are making history with the Simpson Literary Project. We are moving forward.
Yes, thank you all for joining us.
Yes, let's give a nice round of applause again for Joe and Diane for being here today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you all.
Our pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Have a great day. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.